All right. Well, welcome to this session is our very first session of the 2024 Paraprofessional Training, and the title is The Ins and Outs of IDEA. So I hope today that you're going to be able to learn some new things, and if you already know everything about IDEA, maybe hopefully you can just deepen your understanding. So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Dina Smith, and I am a consultant, an education consultant on the continuous improvement team at WDE. I need to give you a little bit of background. I actually started out as a paraprofessional, just like many of you, and then went on to get my degree as a special education teacher. And so I actually substitute taught even before I was a para. So I come to you with a little bit of experience from many different parts of special education and general education. I have actually been in all settings, from started out in the high school and then went to the junior high school and then ended up in elementary. And so I kind of went back down that continuum of grades. So it was an interesting perspective, but it definitely gave me a wide experience and perspective of different grades, different students, and just whole different experiences. I'm also a mom of 6 and a Grammy of 10, and have a daughter who's getting married here really soon, and she will be my last one. So soon to be an empty nester as well. So lots of different things. But anyway, I just want to say welcome. This is the largest response that we've had so far doing a para training. This is our 3rd year offering paraprofessional training. And with the responses that we're getting, we do not look to stop that anytime soon. So thank you all. I know that you have had a full day of work today working with kiddos. And so I know you're tired, but I hope that you'll just be, ready to go and listening and able to participate throughout this session. I know that some of you are either on your own computer, and some of you are in groups in schools or different places watching together. So however you're watching this session, welcome. I am so grateful that you're here, and hope that we can learn some things together today. We will be using the Q&A. Looks like the chat is disabled during a webinar. I had to move it from a meeting to a webinar because of the size of the group today. So we will be using the Q&A, and we'll go ahead and get started here. I happened to see this quote the other day, and I just thought it was so fitting for our time together. So I'm just gonna, if you'll permit me, I'm just gonna read this because I thought it was so fitting. A paraprofessional, you are the heartfelt hero. You use your talents to help students discover their own. You dedicate your time and energy each day to the students in your care, and you do it all while meeting the individual needs of many. And I know that you guys are doing this. You're meeting the needs of not just students, but the teachers who you support as well. And so I just wanted to take the time to thank you for your time, your effort, and putting your heart and soul into all you do to support our kids across the state. You are definitely appreciated. So thank you so much. This is just a quick glance at our training schedule, what we're going to be doing throughout our time together. You can see that session 2 will be October 17th, and it will be the 3 R's: roles, responsibilities, and relationships. Session 3, November 7th, session 4, November 14th, and our last session will be December 5th. I have 2 in close together in November. They're not 2 weeks apart because I didn't want to get close to Thanksgiving. I know how I feel about my family time around the holidays, and I wanted to respect your time as well. So those 2 will be back-to-back weeks in November. All right. I already mentioned, if you have questions, please put those in the chat or not in the chat. Sorry about that. I realize that's been disabled. Put it in the Q&A. I do have Jennifer Duncan and Susan Shipley on, and they will be helping to manage that as well. So thank you to both of you for helping out with that. I've had a lot of questions whether these sessions will be recorded, and yes, they will be. Each one will be recorded. And I just wanted to point out, you may attend any or all sessions that you'd like to. You can also go back and watch those recordings at any time once they're posted. I'll give you more information on that later. But yes, you will be able to, if you want to attend just a few or all, feel free to do so. However, if you're seeking PTSB or STARS credit, attendance is mandatory for all 5 sessions. And watching the recordings do not count as being in attendance. So there's no way for me to track that. But that's only if you want PTSB or STARS credit will that attendance be mandatory. And at the end of each session, there will be a form for you to fill out. And so that will be each individual, whether you're watching as a group, that form has to be individual. That's going to have some information that we'll need in order to give you credit. So make sure that you do get those forms filled out if you're seeking credit. All right. I'm going to see, I think I can do this poll while we are on together. Let me just see if it will allow me to do that. We're going to start off with a quick poll. Are you guys able to see the poll? Okay, great. I'll give you some time to go ahead and get started on that. This one is just, what's your role? Who's joining us today? There's actually 3 questions on there, so it shouldn't take very long. I'll give you guys a little bit of time to get that. If you're joining as a group, of course, you're going to have to answer this one as a group, and that's fine. I'll kind of just watch, and as it starts slowing down, I'll end it here in just a little bit. So if you haven't answered the poll, go ahead, quickly answer the poll. All right. Looks like we're slowing down here. I'm going to go ahead and end that so we can take a quick peek. All right, looks like we do have a little bit of some variance, but of course, 88% of you are paraprofessionals, which I figured. We do have a gen ed teacher. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here. It's always so wonderful to have our gen ed teachers with us. A few special education teachers, a parent, awesome, and maybe some other. And then grade levels, looks like mainly we have our early child or our elementary. We have some pre-K and some secondary. So that's awesome. I love having a mixture. All right. This is the part I really wanted to see as well is what do you already know about IDEA? And looks like about half of you know nothing about IDEA. So I'm really grateful that we're doing this one first. I know that sometimes it's really hard when we're expected to do some things for our job that we really, that's not, most of you probably don't have any training about IDEA unless you've decided to jump in and do some of those things to, get more education or maybe become a teacher. So I get it. And trust me, even when you go through school, there's so much about IDEA. I still learn every day, every single day. All right. So today's session, we're going to cover what is IDEA. We're going to talk about disability categories. We're going to go through the 6 principles of IDEA. And we're going to talk about the FAPE continuum, FERPA and HIPAA, and then, of course, procedural safeguards for our students and families. And right now, we're going to jump into, there's a lot of acronyms in the special education world, in education period, but especially in special education. And just to give you a little side note, when I was a special education teacher, I thought, okay, I think I know about every acronym there is, until I started at the state. And I realized then that there were so many more I had no idea about. So we're going to do a little activity. I'd asked in our email that I'd sent out for you to have a piece of paper and something to write with. I'm going to give you just a second to grab that if you didn't already have it ready for you or with you. If you'll go ahead and grab a piece of paper and a pen, we're going to do a little activity about some acronyms. So I'll give you just a second to grab that before we begin. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Looks like I'm seeing a lot of thumbs up that you're ready to go. So I've got a few of these. I want you to go ahead and just make a little line down your paper. On the left side, put the acronym, and on the right side, go ahead and see if you know what those mean. And it's going to be probably tough if you know nothing about IDEA, but maybe you've at least heard these in school or from your teachers, something, and make a guess if you think you know what it is. So I'm going to give you, let's see, we'll go with about 3 minutes for you to go ahead and just write these down and go ahead and take a stab at it. If you're done sooner, go ahead and start giving me some thumbs up and I'll know that you're ready to move on. Oh, some of you are fast. I don't think we're going to need 3 minutes. You guys are awesome. Why don't you go ahead and give me a thumbs down if you still need more time? Okay, I'm not seeing any thumbs down, so I'm going to go ahead and move on. This next slide is going to give you the answers. So if you didn't know what they were, you're welcome to go ahead and fill them in. If you have time to do that, I'll go ahead and show that to you now. So ASD, which could stand for autism spectrum disorder, or sometimes you may see it as AT, they're both autism. There is another AT, so you don't want to get it confused, but so usually depending on the context of either the conversation or in print, but you should be able to tell that. APE is adaptive physical education. AT is assistive technology, if you see it that way by itself, or like I said, in that kind of context. A BIP or a BIP, Behavior Intervention Plan, DVR, Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, FAPE, which we even had on our one of our first slides, is a free, appropriate public education. FBA, or sometimes you'll hear people say FUBA, is Functional Behavior Assessment. FERPA is a Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And sorry, there's going to be some of these that even have abbreviations, just because I didn't have enough room there. But LEA is a local education agency or your district. All right, one more of these. So go ahead again and make your list and see if you know these.
Dina, I don't know if you're seeing the Q&A. Some people are saying they weren't able to get them copied and they want you to go back to the previous page.
Okay. Let's let people get this one done first. And then how about if we have time, I'll go back to that. I apologize, but just for time. And I will be sharing my slides with you, so you'll have all these answers too. We have a lot to cover today, so I don't want to go over. We can't help it. I'm seeing some thumbs up. People must be getting done. Give you just a few more seconds, and then I'll go ahead and share those answers. All right. LRE, least restrictive environment. OHI is a disability category. It stands for other health impairment. OSEP is our Office of Special Education Programs. An OT is an occupational therapist. A PT is a physical therapist. SDI is specially designed instruction. An SEA is a state education agency, and in our case is the Wyoming Department of Education. SLD is specific learning disability. TBI is another category of disability, and it stands for traumatic brain injury. This one is one, I normally don't put this on an acronym list, but I wanted you to know what this is. This is what we call it WAPSID, and it's the Wyoming Advisory Panel for Students with Disabilities. And I put this one on here because this panel is a panel of a group of people who, there's representatives from state agencies, but that we also look for parents of students with disabilities. And we are currently in need of some parents of students with disabilities on our panel. We need 51% to be parents, so that we'd love to hear your voices and to hear what your input, because this panel actually advises our state superintendent of public instruction of the needs of our students with disabilities across the state. And so we're always looking for people. So if you're interested in knowing more about that, please email me. And there is an application process, but we'd love to add more parents to our panel. All right, so what is IDEA? I know we just figured out what the acronym means, but let's get a little more history about that. This brief IDEA timeline, it provides a snapshot of how it has become to be the special education law it is today, but it doesn't offer the entire story. As you can see, this is just a short timeline. Many landmark civil rights cases have truly shaped and changed how public schools perceive, treat, and educate children with disabilities. Prior to special education laws, millions of children with disabilities were excluded from public education. Many of them were institutionalized or placed in programs that provided little to no learning. The students with disabilities who were allowed in public schools were often placed in classrooms that were separated and they were away from their non-disabled peers, which, as you know, it keeps them from having more fulfilling educational experience. And many times it didn't even address their learning needs. On November 29, 1975, President Gerald Ford signed the Education for All Handicapped Children Act, or known as EHA, which guaranteed a free, appropriate public education, which now you know is FAPE, right? To every child with a disability. EHA was established to address two major issues. One was children with disabilities being completely excluded from the education system. And the other area that it addressed was children with limited access to education due to a disability. And now we're going to jump to 1990. In 1990, Congress reauthorized EHA and changed the title to what we know today as the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. New disability categories were added and updates were made to the Individualized Education Program, or IEP, which included the requirement of an individual transition plan to help students transition to higher education and or employment. So before that, there really wasn't a whole lot done for kids who were transitioning out. Now we do have that in place. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, is a law that makes available a free, appropriate public education to eligible children with disabilities throughout the nation and ensures special education and related services to those children. The IDEA governs how states and public agencies provide early intervention, special education, and related services to more than 8 million, this was as of 2022 and 23, eligible infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities. Infants and toddlers birth through age 2 with disabilities and their families receive early intervention services under IDEA Part C, and our kiddos and youth 3 to 21 receive education and related services under IDEA Part B. On December 23rd, 2024, Congress reauthorized IDEA, and this time updates to regulations were made to enforce the law. So part of that is the stated purpose for the IDEA now is education for all, and ensures that all children have a right to FAPE and education. It also ensures that parents and students have rights and that their rights are protected. There's federal assistance to states. There's early intervention. And that includes a statewide comprehensive coordinated multidisciplinary interagency system for all of our infants and toddlers with disabilities and including their families. We'll learn a little more about that later. Ensuring a quality education. It ensures that not do we just give them an education, but they do have a right to a quality education, just like their non-disabled peers. And of course, accountability to assess and ensure the effectiveness of effort. With the 2004 IDEA reauthorization came a focus on reading as a driving force, calling for early intervention services, including children not currently identified as needing special education, but who need additional support. And then most recently in 2017, even more changes were seen. We had a landmark Supreme Court ruling in Andrew F. versus the Douglas County School District, where Congress addressed and further defined FAPE requirements under IDEA. This ruling determined that students with disabilities are required to receive more than just de minimis or just some educational benefit, and that the IEP must be reasonably calculated to enable the child to make progress appropriate in light of his circumstances. And additionally, the court emphasized the requirement that every child should have the chance to meet challenging objectives. Just so you know, this was the first time in 35 years that the court clarified the legal standard of a free and appropriate public education. So this was a big deal. Some of you may know Lenore Knutson. She was actually there in the courtroom that day to listen to this ruling. It was pretty exciting. All right, so special education. as you see here, throughout the history of special education, it's clear that special education is not meant to be a classroom or a place a student is sent to. It's a set of services meant to enable students with disabilities to be involved in their general classroom, to make academic progress, to provide an opportunity to participate and interact with students that do not have disabilities, and to prepare them for education and/or employment. The IDEA requires all public schools accepting federal funds to provide a free, appropriate public education to all children with disabilities, which guarantees equal access to education. Procedural safeguards are in place to ensure the rights of children and their parents are protected. We'll learn a little more about that later too. And once again, special education is not a place. It's a set of services which includes adapting instruction, including what's presented and how it's presented to address the unique needs of that child that results from the disability. Special education is meant to support grade level curriculum and the learning of that academic content. All right, so IDEA actually has 4 parts. Part A just lays the basic foundation for the rest of the act, and it's pretty much largely administrative. Part B entails educational procedures for our kiddos 3 to 21. We do have Part B. There's 2 different parts to Part B. There's Part B 619, and that serves our 3 to 5-year-olds or our pre-K students. And then we have Part B 611, which serves our 5 to 21-year-old students. Part C actually deals with our infants and toddlers with disabilities and provides guidelines for early intervention. It's actually more of a medical model, but it actually, it supports the family and to help the family meet those, to help them to also help meet the developmental needs of their child. And then Part D, it just contains requirements for national activities designed to improve the education for all children with disabilities. All right, so as we start looking into IDEA, there are actually 6 guiding principles. So we're going to take a look at a little bit of a deep, or a little bit of a look into each one of those. We won't have time to really get deep into each one of those, but I would like to make sure you have a little understanding about all 6. So the first one we're going to take a look at is FAPE. And then appropriate evaluation, we'll look at the IEP, LRE, parent and student participation, and then procedural safeguards. Those are the 6 principles of IDEA. All right, we learned the acronym means free, appropriate public education, but what does that mean exactly? According to 34 CFR, which 300.17, it states free appropriate public education, or FAPE, means special education and related services that A, are provided at public expense under public supervision and direction and without charge. B, meets the standards of the SEA, including the requirements of this part. C, include an appropriate preschool, elementary school, or secondary school education in the state involved. And D, are provided in conformity with an individualized education program that meets the requirements of 300.320 through 300.324. So what does that really mean? Let's break that down just a little bit. Free, IDEA requires that the education of a child with a disability must be provided at public expense, meaning no cost to the parent. However, there's a little caveat there. Any incidental fees, such as membership fees for clubs or any other fees, will be the same cost as for general education students. So anything that other students would already be charged for, those students are also required to pay. But if it comes to providing for special education, there's no cost. Appropriate means that each child with a disability is entitled to an education that is appropriate for his or her needs. Appropriate education is determined on an individual basis, and it may not be the same for each child with a disability. I know sometimes, you think, well, just because one child has autism, that just means you've met one child with autism. because every child with autism is different and has different needs, just like with any other disability category. Each child with a disability will be entitled to an education that is tailored and planned to meet their individual needs as stated in their Individualized Education Program, or IEP. Public refers to the public school system. Children with disabilities, regardless of the nature or severity of their disabilities, they have the same right to attend the public schools as their non-disabled peers. The public school system must educate students with disabilities, respond to their individual needs, and help them plan for their future. All right, and education guarantees that eligible children with disabilities will receive a public education that includes special education and related services as directed by the child's IEP based on the child's individual needs. You're going to hear that a lot because I really want to drive that home. Every one of these IEPs should not be cookie cutter. They are all individualized. In fact, that's even in the name, right? The education should prepare the child for the future, meaning for future education, future employment, and of course, independent living. So child find. This is something when we start talking about, we're moving now into that evaluate part of the 6 principles of IDEA. This is something that I'm just going to read this part so that you can see. The state must have in effect policies and procedures to ensure that all children with disabilities residing in the state, including children with disabilities who are homeless children or are wards of the state, and children with disabilities attending private schools, regardless of the severity of their disability, and who are in need of special education and related services are, here's the 3, identified, located, and evaluated. And that second part, the II, is a practical method is developed and implemented to determine which children are currently receiving needed special education and related services. So we're going to break this down just a little bit too, because child find is something that is a responsibility of everyone. So schools are required to locate, identify, and evaluate all children from birth to age 21. So this is not just if in the school system, it's all birth to 21. And then again, I just want to point out, it's really, sometimes it's hard because if they're not attending public school, sometimes people think, well, how's that going to happen? But the private schools are still, we're still responsible for ensuring that all children are found. And this includes all children who are suspected of having a disability, including children who receive passing grades and are advancing from grade to grade. The law does not require children to be labeled or classified by their disability. So, I think sometimes we get thinking that it has to be just academics, that if they're falling behind, that is going to warrant child find. No, it's all things. It's functional, it's behavior, it's all parts of the child, the whole child. We need to look at that. So what does this even mean for paraprofessionals? Do you have an obligation? The answer is yes. As an educational professional within the public school system, you also have a responsibility to report any suspicion of a child having a disability. This does not mean that you're going to say, oh, I know little Johnny over here has autism or he's ADHD, or we're not asking you to diagnose, we're not asking you to do any of those things. But if you have a suspicion that a child may have a disability, you have an obligation to report that to the teacher. And then they will take it from there. All right, so an appropriate evaluation must be conducted within 60 calendar days of the parent giving consent. So once there's a suspicion and that's reported to the teacher will then start drafting a consent form for the child to be evaluated. And then they will have 60 days to fully complete that comprehensive evaluation. And a comprehensive reevaluation, that's done every 3 years. That's a minimum requirement, not a limitation, just so you know. And a new or updated evaluation is to be conducted if there's reason to suspect a need, or if the parents request an evaluation. That kind of means even if a child is already on an IEP, but there's new suspicion that there might be something else going on, and there's further assessment that needs to be conducted, that still needs to be brought forward, because just because they may be, from even within the year, there are many times that a child could be on an IEP for reading and a specific learning disability and reading, and then all of a sudden some new needs are presented, and those need to be addressed as well. And so sometimes, evaluation is not needed to address those needs, but sometimes it is. So we need to make sure that all of the child's needs are addressed. The evaluation must assess the child in all areas related to the child's suspected disability. The evaluation results will be used to decide if the child's eligibility for special education and related services, and to make decisions about an appropriate educational program for the child. So who does this? So it's a group of qualified professionals and the parents look at the child's evaluation results. And together, that IEP team decides if the child is a child with a disability as defined by IDEA. It's never a unilateral decision, meaning there's not one person within the team can just say, yes, they have a disability, and and they just move that along. It has to be a team decision. And parents do have the right to ask for a hearing to challenge that eligibility decision. If the child is found to be a child with a disability as defined by IDEA, he or she is eligible for special education and related services, and the IEP team must meet to write an IEP within 30 calendar days after a child is determined eligible. There are times that the eligibility meeting and the IEP are held in the same meeting if there's time and if that's appropriate for all involved. Before receiving special education services, it's required that a child have an appropriate and comprehensive evaluation. IDEA requires that all assessments be non-discriminatory and all procedures be non-biased. There must be a variety of assessment tools and strategies performed in order to have an appropriate evaluation. And of course, it needs to be administered by trained and knowledgeable personnel. And as you see here on the screen, it of course needs to be in the language the child uses, because that we certainly wouldn't get the right results if we tried to evaluate you in a Spanish test and you only spoke English. We wouldn't get good results. So we need to make sure we're giving those assessments in that child's language. All right. This is an evaluation wheel. Pangora Consulting has actually put this together for us. And you can see here, I love this wheel because it really gives us an idea of making sure that we're not missing anything, and that we're really looking at the whole child. So you can see two different things going on here. You see the inner side, and you see like health, vision, or hearing. You could imagine if a child can't hear well or see, or hear or see, and maybe either well or at all, you can see that would really have an effect on how the results would come out on their evaluation. So we need to make sure that they have that screening done before those evaluations are conducted, so that we make sure that we get an accurate result. And then we look at cognitive ability. We look at their academic skills. We look at communication, social emotional, functional skills, and physical or motor skills. And then you can see here, there's questions. We conduct the evaluation, look at all the assessments. We answer and see are there any more questions that we have. We consider, is there anything else that we're missing, right? Is there anything that would exclude this child from being a child with a disability? And then it just continues. That cycle never should stop. This should be fluid the whole time a child is in special education. We don't just evaluate and say that this child is eligible and never look back at those things again. We need to constantly be looking and assessing and seeing, are there any other needs that need to be addressed? So let's take a look at disability categories. So in Wyoming, there are some places that do not look at developmental delay, but in Wyoming, I'm going to point this one out because this one goes through age 9 for Wyoming. And at that point, that child would have to meet another disability category beyond that. So we have autism, cognitive disability, deaf blindness, that DD or developmental delay, that's another acronym, and emotional disability, hearing impairment, including deafness, multiple disabilities, which just means that child could have several of those at the same time. They could have an orthopedic impairment, other health impairment, that includes ADHD. This next one is specific learning disability. And I want to point out, this does include dyslexia, dyscalculia, which is math, or dysgraphia, which has to do with writing. Dyslexia is a reading disability, and other learning differences. And an SLD, or specific learning disability, that child could have that in reading, math, writings, as you can see there, or maybe all of the above. Speech or language impairment, traumatic brain injury, and of course, the last one, visual impairment, including blindness. And I love that picture that's on the screen there, just to point it out. It says some disabilities look like this, that are very visible, right? Sometimes we can definitely tell that someone has a disability, but others look like this, and it's not visible. There's no way to tell that you can, that you are able to know if they have that. So just be aware of that too, especially with our emotional disabilities. There are many times that those children, whether it's depression, something going on like that, we look at that because there's so many times that maybe their attendance is lacking. Maybe they're having a hard time, and we may not know that there may be something else going on behind that as to why they're not wanting to come to school. It could be anxiety, it could be depression, it could be many different things. So we need to just be aware that, and again, we're not diagnosing, but if there's suspicion, we need to make sure we're passing that information on so that that child, we can assess appropriately. All right. There is a two-part process in determining if a student is to be found eligible in IDEA. Federal regulations require that eligibility for special education services be determined based on so that prong 1, the child having presence of a disability. So they might have a disability. They might even have, a doctor may have said this child has ADHD. They may have even said this child has autism. But if we only have the one prong, that child is not IDEA eligible. They must have the second prong along with it, which is that a student's education is adversely affected, meaning that due to the disability, the student requires special education or specially designed instruction, they're the same thing, and related services in order to access the general education curriculum. Courts have ruled that if a student can receive educational benefit or for preschool children appropriately participate in activities from the instruction and services provided in the regular classroom, even if they have a disability, then they do not qualify as an eligible student under IDEA. Districts can provide struggling students with interventions in the regular classroom, such as MTSS, PBIS, differentiated instruction, and accommodations. Which, may mean that they would qualify for a 504. I'm going to go through this slide, and then we're going to take a quick break because I know that we've been going about 45 minutes at that point, and so it's about halfway through the presentation. But I want to go through this one first. It says, what if there's no educational need? If the disability does not adversely affect educational performance, the student is not eligible under IDEA. If the child does not need special education or specially designed instruction, they're not eligible under IDEA. If they only need a related service and not specially designed instruction, the student is not eligible under IDEA. As I said before, they could be found eligible for a 504, but not always. And that's the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, that 504. But they could, if they need accommodations, they could be given those based on their individual needs. And so looks like we had a quick, let's see, did we have a question? Let's go ahead and take a break, and I'm going to take a look and see if we had questions. So how about I have 4:46 on my clock, so let's come back in 5 minutes, and we'll be back at 51. I'll see you then. Go get a drink, go to the restroom. I know you probably didn't get a chance to do that after being with kids all day. All right, we're going to get started in about 1 minute. All right, I'm showing 4:51. Let's go ahead and get started so that we can let you have your evening back here soon. So let's talk about the FAPE continuum. We talked about comprehensive evaluation, and when we do a comprehensive evaluation, we should be, I want you to take a look at this. I love this chart also. This is also from Pingora Consulting. If you look down here at this little red dot, it says start here. We're going to make sure that we complete a comprehensive evaluation. That is going to also include understanding present levels of that child. Where are they? What are their needs? We look at strengths, we look at weaknesses, we look at all of those things. Where are they at academically, functionally, behaviorally, all those things that would apply to that student. And so then we move down into, and of course, and you see the top of that, on that above the brown where present levels, it needs to translate to educational needs, okay? And we can talk, I don't know that we'll have time, if we'll have time to get into that or not, but those need to translate to education. And then measurable goals. Based on the needs, we're going to set goals for that child for 1 year. An IEP is set for 1 year. And they need to be rigorous but reasonable, right? We need to make sure that we're trying to close that gap. And all of these goals are, there should be a skill gap there. If we're setting a goal, there should be a skill gap, and we're trying to close that gap. And so we're setting goals to try to help them, within a year, where should they be? And so specially designed instruction, or SDI, as we like to call it, is needed. If they're IDA, they have to have specially designed instruction in order to be able to meet those goals. And we're going to do that through our services and the supports that we're going to provide. And then least restrictive environment, we're going to go over that next, but in just a little bit, but we're going to, there's a mandate there, and there's 3 maximums that we're going to talk about. But all of this should help that child achieve progress and educational benefit, and they should be making progress on closing that gap. So educational benefit, I want to talk a little bit about that because that's kind of confusing. But a school must offer an IEP reasonably calculated to enable a child to make progress appropriate in light of the child's circumstances. Where'd you hear that? That Andrew F. case, right? So educational benefit is defined as a student progress on IEP goals and or general education standards, because we should be writing our goals based on standards. Last year in Wyoming, I just want to give you a little tidbit here. Last year in Wyoming, there were 91,640 total students, not disabled, total students enrolled in school districts across the state. Approximately 13,950 of those students from kindergarten to 12th grade were found to be a student with a disability. In Part B 619, meaning our 3 to 5 year olds, there were approximately 2,260 of those. And then that means if you total those up, our Part B 619 and our Part B 611, so 3 to 21, that means that we were responsible for ensuring that 16,210 children receive FAPE. And it's a big job. And that's why I'm telling you, your job is so needed. We need you to help to do that. We cannot do it alone. We definitely need you to help with that. There were also approximately 1,155 infants and toddlers. So that's birth to 2 in Part C. However, Behavioral Health Division, or BHD, as we like to, another acronym, is responsible to ensure that these children receive the appropriate services and interventions that they need. And they're served by local child development centers across the state. I know some of you are on today from the CDC, so thank you so much for being here. And thank you for serving those kiddos. All right, let's look at the IEP. There's different parts of the IEP. We talked a little bit about present levels of academic and functional performance. You might hear people say plaque. That's another one. I don't think I even, well, I think I did put that one on, but this statement is the foundation of the IEP. It actually summarizes the student's strengths, their weaknesses, and their abilities in, as we said before, academic and or functional skill areas. And that includes how the student's disability affects their involvement in the general education curriculum. This also includes behavior. So, statement of measurable goals, that's another part of the IEP. Goals should describe what the student is expected to accomplish in academic and or functional skills in 1 year. Challenging, ambitious, and measurable goals should be linked to the student's needs for specially designed instruction. The goals help IEP team personnel determine whether the student is making educational gains and whether the program is providing meaningful educational benefit. Since that NJUF case, this individualized education must be developed based on the student's unique needs, or according to the Supreme Court, reasonably calculated to enable the child to make progress appropriate in light of his circumstances or her circumstances. All right, the third part is description of how that child's progress towards meeting annual goals will be measured, and when periodic progress reports will be provided. So there's different parts to that, not just how it's going to be measured, but how it's going to be reported out. Services. This is a statement of all the educational services to be provided by the school in order to help the student meet her annual goals. Should be provided in the student's determined LRE, so that least restrictive environment. Related services are in connection with the child's education and development and could include speech language, occupational therapy, physical therapy, etc. Supplementary aids and services are tools or modifications used to support the child's learning. A few examples are maybe they need adapted equipment like special seats or cutout cups. Maybe they need that AT or assistive technology, maybe like word processors, software, communication devices, screen magnifiers. There's many. These are just some examples. In teaching, they may need graphic organizers or audiobooks, and modifications could be made to the curriculum, maybe to the length of their day or school year. Social, they may need peer tutoring and training. That can be for staff, that could be for students, and it can even be for parents. Many times you'll see training for parents written into an IEP. And then a statement of the program modifications or supports for school personnel that will be provided to enable the child. One is to advance appropriately toward attaining the annual goals, to be involved in and make progress in the general ed curriculum in accordance with, and to participate in extracurricular and other non-academic activities. And the last one is to be educated and participate with other children with disabilities and non-disabled children in the activities described in this section. So that is coming straight from the regulation. The Progress Center offers these questions for the IEP team to consider as they're going through that. One is under program modifications. Are modifications to the physical classroom environment necessary to promote progress? In the general education curriculum, access to peers with or without disabilities, and progress toward IEP goals. Are modifications to the school schedule needed to access that gen ed curriculum? And are modifications needed to the program curriculum? And then when we talk about supports for school personnel, it could be training, coaching, maybe conference attendance, and that could be for staff at the school, it could be for parents. And then the other one could be what special equipment or materials are necessary, and is planning time with other staff or administrators necessary to implement the IEP. This is a lot of times where you see your PLCs. I know that when I was teaching, I made sure that I had PLC time with my paraprofessionals because, you know, you go through and you're with the students a lot during the day and the teacher's doing other things. When are you having time to meet together to talk about those things and to give that data? And not just to give the numbers and the data, but to actually have a conversation about that student and their progress. All right, LRE, least restrictive environment. You know, the first part of this just talks about that states must have in place they must have in effect policies and procedures to ensure that LRE is happening, right? And then that second part is where we want to talk about. We must ensure to the maximum extent appropriate children with disabilities, including children in public or private institutions or other care facilities. It could be in residential facilities, it could be in juvenile detention. There's, you know, and so we need to make sure that they're in the right setting, right? That are they educated with children who are non-disabled and special classes, separate schooling, or other removal of children with disabilities from the regular environment. But the biggest thing that we need to make sure that they are given supplementary aids and services. If they're given supplementary aids and services and it still can't be achieved satisfactorily, that's when we start looking at the LRE continuum, which we're going to talk about next. But I want to mention that, again, LRE is determined on a case-by-case basis during the development of the IEP. Just because a student has autism does not mean that all students with autism need to be put in this special classroom. There are students with autism who are not even on an IEP and do not qualify for an IEP. They do not need this specially designed instruction. So I think it's really important that we remember that all these parts are individualized, and we need to look at the assessments, and we need to make sure that we're making those determinations individually based on those kids' needs. All right. Whoops, went too far. 1 second. I also want to point out that the term environment, I know it's kind of tricky because it says least restrictive environment, but the term environment can be interpreted to imply that it's a place or location, but LRE does not merely refer to a particular setting. Identifying the LRE involves making program decisions about what services and supports a student needs to be successful and where and how those services and supports can be provided effectively. So there's two parts to that, right? There's, yes, whether they can be educated fully in the general ed setting, maybe it's the resource center, but we're going to take a look at that. There are 3 maximums in LRE that you don't see anywhere else. So let's take a look at that. So the first one is, to the maximum extent appropriate, children with disabilities are provided supplementary aids and services to enable them to be educated with children who are non-disabled. So again, those supplementary aids and services that we talked about, some of those examples, so to the maximum extent appropriate, they're provided those. To the maximum extent appropriate, they're educated with children who are non-disabled. So, and of course, given those supplementary aids and services, we need to make sure that we are looking at that continuum all the way. And that third maximum is that to the maximum extent appropriate, children with disabilities are able to participate in extracurricular activities with children who are non-disabled. So there's a continuum, again, that our friends from Pangora Consulting has provided for us. Let's take a look at that. When an IEP team comes together and they are looking at the correct setting for that child, we need to be looking first at the regular classroom or the general education setting. That should always be considered first. And of course, not just, plopped into that gen ed setting, but can they receive their education if they're given the appropriate supplementary aids and services? Can they be educated in the regular classroom? If they cannot, and only if they cannot, do we move on to the next? And so only if those regular, can't be achieved with supplementary aids and services, do we move on to special classes, meaning like a resource room or different rooms. And then it continues down that continuum. Again, only if no lesser restrictive option will work, do we even consider a separate school? And then into residential. And the most restrictive setting is hospital or homebound, because there's no peers around, disabled or non-disabled, right? And so that is the most restrictive. And we start thinking about this as, you know, I like to think of the example as this: if you have a child who, you know, is struggling with language or even articulation, and we just have them around children who also have articulation or language issues, how far do you think they're going to get? You know, if again, I'll just use little Johnny, I'll just use his name here. You know, and I, you know, it's jokingly can't say it's ours, and he's like the, you know, that wascally wabbit. If everybody's saying that wascally wabbit, he's never going to see the, you know, how to say that, because as you and I know, children learn best from their peers, right? They're listening, they're talking to them, they want to be like them. And so it's so important to have them in the least restrictive environment so that they can see and have modeling around them. And so not just coming from adults, but from their peers. So, and of course, there are times when on this continuum, there's a continuum for a reason. Some children need some of these more restrictive settings. But if we can, we always like to see if we can provide the appropriate supplementary aids and services. And I'm going to say that again, because sometimes we look at these supplementary aids and services and we think, okay, there we go. And we don't go back and say, maybe it's the supplementary aids and services that need to be changed. And we just go ahead and start moving them down the continuum instead of looking to see if those supplementary aids and services are even appropriate. So it's always important to make sure that those are appropriate, and then, you know, before we start moving kids. Oh, I forgot that this has little arrows. So that just moves us down a continuum. All right. The next part of one of those guiding principles of IDEA is that parents should be able to participate in decision making. And the IDEA's procedural requirements for developing a child's IEP are purposely designed to create a collaborative process and explicitly place special emphasis on parental involvement as part of the child's IEP team. The law requires schools to allow parents of students with disabilities to meaningfully participate in the creation and implementation of the student's IEP. If the school prevents parents from meaningful participation, the student may be denied FAPE, or free appropriate public education, which is a violation against the IDEA. If neither parent can attend the IEP team meeting, the public agency must use other methods to ensure parent participation, including individual or conference telephone calls. Conducting an IEP team meeting without a parent in attendance is they may be conducted with a parent in attendance if the public agency is unable to convince the parents that they should attend. In this case, excuse me, I'm going to take a quick drink. In this case, the public agency must keep a record of its attempts to arrange a mutually agreed upon time and place, such as detailed records of telephone calls, attempts, and results of those calls, copies of correspondence, so emails sent to the parents or mailings, and any responses received. And then, of course, detailed records of visits made to the home, place of employment, and results of those visits. So, you know, a lot of times schools have thought in the past that, oh, well, we tried 3 times. It does not say that in IDEA. It says that they must provide an opportunity for parents to meaningfully participate. So, you know, and of course, you know, there are times when it just doesn't work. I've had instances myself as a teacher, but I've also made sure that I've tried to make arrangements. I had a single dad who was a truck driver, and, you know, there was no way he was going to be able to come to the school to have an in-person IEP meeting. And this was back before COVID, before we started getting creative, right? Having virtual meetings if we needed to, but we agreed on a time and place and date when he would pull over, and we conducted an IEP meeting with him on the side of a road. So it can be done, but we need to make sure that we're attempting to give that parent every opportunity to participate. So what do you feel it means to meaningfully participate? I don't know if you're able to type something into the Q&A. If you are, what do you think it means? What do you think that means? I'll give you just a second. Some of you may be parents of students with disabilities. And so if you are, I'd really love to hear from you. Like, what do you feel like that means to you? Be present and available. Yeah, that is definitely part of it. At the very least, it should involve a parent being fully informed. We need to make sure that they are involved in whatever way they can be, and make sure that they have a voice or a say in the development of their child's IEP. We need to make sure they have input in present levels. Sometimes we just start going through and we think we know all that child's strengths and weaknesses, and the parent can give you so much more, because many times, as you know, kids are not the same at home as they are at school. So it's really important to see like what they feel their child's strengths and weaknesses is. We can learn so much from our parents, because they know their child better than we do in many, many ways. I know as a parent of a child with a disability, I know it can be really intimidating to navigate the IEP process. If you are a parent with a child with a disability, be sure to ask questions and be involved. The team's going to assume that you understand fully what's going on in that meeting if you don't speak up. You know your child best, and you are your child's best advocate. And again, we went over what if a parent can't attend. Just make sure you are documenting, and this goes for teachers. This does not fall on you as the paraprofessional, but I just wanted you to be aware that that is the requirement for teachers to do that, especially in case you're a parent. So student participation and decision making. This really falls on, so those transition age students should be invited to their IEP as appropriate. Sometimes it's not appropriate for that child to attend, but if they're able to and it's appropriate, and the team feels like it would be a good idea, because they really have a say on looking at those transition goals. When they get to be that age, there are those transition goals put into the IEP, so that they can have an opportunity to be successful, because they're not going to be in that school system forever, right? It goes to 21 for a reason. Some children are not ready to leave at 18, and it's first, can go to 21. And so we try to give them every opportunity to graduate, to get a certificate, whatever the case may be for that child. But there's the IDEA requires that students be invited to IEP meetings when they're 14 or older. However, their attendance is not required. Even if they're older, it's not required. It really is depending on that child. All right, let's look at procedural safeguards. These are live links, so when you get these slides, there is a full copy of the Notice of Procedural Safeguards and one in Spanish. The notice is designed to help parents understand their rights and the rights of their student. It also explains how to resolve disputes. At least once a year, the school district must give parents a copy with a complete explanation of the rights and protections under the law. The procedural safeguard notice may be given several times during the year because the school district is required to provide it when a parent or the school requests an initial evaluation, when a state complaint is filed, when a due process complaint is received in accordance with discipline procedures, and when a parent just requests a copy of it. Procedural safeguards notice contains an explanation of all the safeguards related to independent education evaluation. That means even though the school district has done a complete comprehensive evaluation, the parent may not agree with it. And so they have the right to get an independent education evaluation. And there may be times for, and then the procedural safeguards also contains prior written notice, information, parental consent, access to student records, all that information so that they can know what to do if they need to resolve complaints, mediation, due process, placement, civil action, lawyer's fees, all of that is in the safeguards for them. IDA requires that this information be written in a language that is understandable and provided in the parent's native language or in another mode of communication that is used. IEP teams should ensure that parents, like I said, understand their rights, not just hand them this packet of, there are many times that parents, it's daunting. This packet can be daunting. So it's really important that the teacher or the IEP team explains the rights to the parents and not just hand them the packet. And many times parents will say, they may have multiple children on IEPs, but each time they're supposed to be presented this packet of procedural safeguards, and each year. So let's talk about FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. Confidentiality is federally mandated, and it assures that a student's private information isn't shared without their permission. FERPA applies to both hard copy and digital copies. Any information regarding students cannot be discussed with others, including other teachers, paras, or other staff in your building. Only report information to that supervising teacher, and be sure you're in private when you do discuss information with that teacher. It's really, not a good place to be doing it in the hallway, whether people can hear, or in the lunchroom, even in the lounge, the teacher lounge. Make sure that you're, if this were your child, just think about it that way. Make sure that it's done in private. There are times when other teachers may need some information, but let your supervising teacher make that call. Don't make that call on your own. And if parents ask questions, I know this happens a lot because paras are often, they spend a lot of time with their kids. And so parents a lot of times will come to paras. Again, refer them to that supervising teacher. Don't get yourself in a pickle, giving information out to parents. I know it can be hard because they can be a little demanding, wanting to know, or you might be friends with them still. Make sure that you're not violating confidentiality. And then this relates to, so personally identifiable information. I know this can be kind of confusing, so I want to put this in. This is also, you'll hear it as PII, but it includes these things, but of course, as it says, it's not limited to student names, numbers, grades, schedules, student performance, either academically or behaviorally, information seen or overheard in the classroom or in the school about a student, or any information learned about any particular student or group of students. So pretty much, just don't get into that, that trap of, wondering. If you're wondering, just don't even do it. And then of course, HIPAA. The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or HIPAA, was signed into federal law in 1996. And this law protects the privacy and security of health information. So it includes all health and medical records. All right, so I know this has been we have gone over so much information today, and we've only touched the surface on IDEA in a really short amount of time. I know that IDEA is complicated and it does take time to fully understand. I can assure you that every time I sit in a SPED law training, I either learn something new or I deepen my understanding of a concept. So Again, I know this is just touching the surface, and I hope that you have more questions about this. I hope that that's what this has done, so that you will go digging a little deeper. But what can you do to help support this IEP process? Why did we even go over IDA? Why did we go over the IEP process? Because much of this is not your responsibility, but you do support. So the ways you can do that, as we talked about earlier in Child Find, make sure that if you have a suspicion of a disability for any child, that you inform your supervising teacher. Make sure you're providing your input, because you are with those kids in so many different settings. Many times, especially in elementary school or and even in the secondary settings, you're with those kids. You see things that many times the teacher does not see. So make sure you're providing your input, and making sure that you're providing that unique perspective that you have. You're supporting student advocacy and independence in all those settings, not just in the gen ed classroom. You know, part of this is that we're trying to, like we said, close that gap. And if we're trying to get them to grade level, we want them to learn to advocate for themselves. And we want to help them learn to be independent. That's going to be in another session down the road, but we're going to talk about that and how to fade those supports, and how to help those kids advocate for themselves. You know, just like our own children, we don't want them to start growing up and to become dependent. And we're going to talk about learned helplessness. That happens many times, and we have the right heart and intent, but many times it turns into making them become more dependent. And of course, you support those IEP goals, and many times you're asked to collect data for reporting progress. And that's also going to be in another session down the road. So I hope you have your paper with you. We're going to do just a quick little fun game of true and false, true or false. So the first one is, a student may be eligible under the IDEA if she qualifies under one of the 13 IDEA disability categories, but does not need specialized instruction. True or false? If you're able to, put it in the Q&A. I want to see if you want to be brave. Not, just quickly write it down, and we're going to see what that answer is. What do you think? Answer is false. Remember, it's that two-prong. They have to meet both. They have to have a disability, and they have to need specially designed instruction or special education, right? Number two, a school psychologist makes the determination of whether a student is eligible for special education and related services. True or false? I need the little music going. Thank you. The answer is false. A school psychologist can conduct that evaluation, make recommendations, and participate as part of the team. But as we said, no one person can make that determination, right? Whether a child is eligible. It takes the whole team. Number three, once the district completes an initial IDEA evaluation, a group of qualified professionals and either the student, the parent, or the superintendent determine whether the child is a child with a disability and what the child's educational needs are. So a group of qualified professionals and A, B, or C. And the answer is the parent. I'm sure you all got that one. The parent is a key and mandatory member of the eligibility team, as we talked about before. So we need to have our parents there. This is the last one. A student who is in a gifted program is disqualified from IDEA eligibility. True or false? Again, they're in a gifted program. Are they disqualified? Nope, they're not. The mere fact that a student is gifted does not disqualify him from eligibility for special ed and related services under IDEA. I don't know if you've ever heard of twice exceptional, but or maybe a 2E, sometimes you see it that way. It describes kids who are gifted in some areas, but also have a learning or developmental disability. So they're considered exceptional because of both their giftedness and their disability. Oh my goodness, we did it. So this is a little bit about session 2. Again, October 17th, same time. We're going to go over the 3 R's: roles, responsibilities, and relationships, so that we can have a little better understanding about what is our teacher roles and what is the para's roles. There's that Zoom registration here. I will be sending out an email to anyone who registered again. So I was getting some emails kicked back to me. So if you didn't see your friends, or if they're wondering, will you please have them email me, because maybe they didn't put their email in right when they registered. And then finally, I'm going to put up the session attendance and participation form. This is important, again, only if you're looking for PTSB or STARS credit. You can get concurrent PTSB and STARS credit at the same time if you're one of those people. STARS credit is for our early childhood folks. So if you are in need of one or both of those, I'm going to put this. You can either use your QR or you can go to that link. Either one, it should work for you. If you have any problems, again, always email me, let me know. Feel free to call me, either one. But I just want to tell you guys, I know it's kind of it's hard because we're on a webinar. I wish I could see your faces and we could sit around and have a big discussion. Maybe one day we can figure out a way to do that across the state and maybe do some things. But for now, I'm hoping that this allows you to participate after school. And I just really appreciate all of you being here today. And I thank you for all that you do. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend. I'll leave this up for a little bit. It sounds like there's some of you having trouble with the form. I will send it out again as a follow-up email to this session. Yeah, it could be a bandwidth issue that with so many people on, I'm not sure. But try again maybe a little later. If you still have issues, give me an email, shoot me an email, and I'll see if I can help walk you through that.
And it's not a link that you can click on. You have to copy it and put it into a browser.
Yeah.
It's nothing to click on live.
Right. But the QR code, if you have a smartphone, use your camera and just hold that camera up, and you'll see a little yellow bar. Click on that. If you've never done that before, it's a little tricky. My kids had to show me the first few times, I'll admit. And then just push on that, and then it should just come right up, and you'll be able to do it even on your phone. If you're just on a computer, yes, I would just type that link right in. Again, if you're still having issues, feel free to email me and I will send you the live link. And I'm just now getting able to see all of the comments that you've put in the chat. Well, you guys are awesome. Thank you so much for your participation today.